Welcome everybody to another horror story. So today's episode is going to be The Dumb Story by Leadership Other 5524. This is not really a horror story. This is a D&D dumb story. And to start, I'd like to propose a philosophical question. Can someone be too dumb to play D&D? This is what we will try to investigate through these quick, simple D&D stories, all taking place within a 3-year period where I, 25 at the time, was DMing for a group with an age range from 23, 2 players I met at school and were a few years behind me, to 43, 2 other guys I met from an online D&D ad where initially one of them was the DM, and a couple of friends my age in the mix. Anyway, this group has had various characters and many great stories, but this post is mainly about a newcomer to the group we had at the time. First of all, this guy, let's call him Resender, was not at all too young. He was around my age, had no mental issues that we knew of, was at college at the time, and is now a successful lawyer and had, according to himself, played before. He was also a pretty nice guy outside of the game, and a bit of an anime enthusiast. But I made sure to explain thoroughly that this game was set on a more low fantasy medieval setting, and even pointed him at Game of Thrones and Conan as references. So, his first character concept? A human fighter. We were playing 3.5 at the time, who wanted to fight with 3 swords at a time. That is, 1 on his mouth and 1 on each hand. A concept I was told is from some anime multiple times when I told the story. That's funny. I don't know why, but the 3 swords at a time, 1 in his mouth, it makes me think of the wolf. I think it's in one of the Dark Souls games. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I've never played Dark Souls, but my boyfriend likes those types of games, and I swear there's a wolf that has a sword in its mouth. But after explaining this is impossible, I got but so-and-so has magic. That's much more impossible. And I had to thoroughly explain to him concepts like verisimilitude, tone, and setting, and he eventually settled on only 2 swords. So, his guy was a make? I'm not sure if that's a typo or not. Human 2-weapon fighter who wanted to become the best swordsman in the country. Sure, whatever, that will work. What can go wrong? The players at the time, it wasn't an ongoing story, were employed at a caravan, with rogue and the fighter types as bodyguards, the gnome cleric, who originally knew the caravan masters, also gnomes, as supervisor, and bard as a chronicler of sorts. They met an NPC gnome who would play riddles with some of them, an infiltrated spy, but that was unknown to them at the time. Got to know each other, played a few dice and card games, drank and told stories of past adventures around the fire, as I painted a picture of those NPCs that would be important in the future. This kind of thing. Among those NPCs, there were, of course, the other guards of the caravan, who, of course, had swords. One of them was particularly tall and had a scar on his forehead, etc. Resender. I challenge him to a duel. Me, why? Resender. I, Resender, see that this man is probably a veteran of many battles, and, as such, I have decided to challenge so I can prove I am the better swordsman. Others, facepalm. Me, rolling wisdom checks for the guard. He's surprised and reluctantly accepts your challenge. They roll initiative. Resender misses his attack. An NPC guard hits and deals something like 6 damage with his sword. Resender misses again. NPC hits and deals something like 7 damage. Resender, a first level fighter with +1 constitution, hits 0 HP and falls. The other players patch him up. But Cleric wouldn't just heal this random guard for no reason, so he makes sure he is alive and then puts him to rest on his tent. Resender loses the first hour of role-playing and the first combat against humanoids who attack the caravan during the night or something. Come next day, they get to this village. This is a homebrew setting, basically dominated by the Order of the Crow, scholars dedicated to studying various subjects and often sought out for around the country to solve very practical problems, build walls, heal diseases, research arcane matters, etc. On this low fantasy setting. Since wizards and clerics are extra rare, Bard, by the way, studied a bit with them, which is why he is a bard. The main building for this order is a tower with its own garrison and a somewhat difficult relation to the city's militia. The plot was supposed to be a murder mystery. One of the crows would die and the PCs would have to find the hidden NPC/poisoner they had spoken to before, the gnome on the caravan. But, of course, before the PCs have even put their backpacks in the rooms, the Order managed for them, and even before any killing could take place, Resender woke up and decided to enter the barracks of the garrison of guards that protected the tower. Of course he did. Of course he did. Resender, who here is your leader? Huh? I am. I challenge you to a duel. Unsheath your sword. Really? Again? Again, dude? Again? Being lawful good, but also something like 6th level. Really? I expect these to be high level. Usually NPCs, if they seem important, they're high level. Why? I attack! Are you sure? Resender actually hits this time and deals some average damage. NPC, Knight, surprised, finally unsheaths his sword and rapidly hit Resender, who not even was yet at full HP, twice. Resender is unconscious, again. This time, Resender wakes up in a cell and is going to be judged for attacking an official for no reason whatsoever. But Bard, chaotic good, decides to intervene and uses his link to the Order, some spells, and various successful persuasion and bluff rolls to convince the judge of the Order, they had their own jurisdiction within the city, to essentially just cut one arm off Resender, as opposed to condemn him to death, despite the attack happening in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses. Before the sentence is carried out, however, they hear screaming, and the killing takes place in the tower, while the majority of the people were in the courtyard for the judgment. Everybody goes inside, and they try to investigate, and Resender is taken back to his cell, in chains, while the rest of the PCs get to investigate, and Rogue and Cleric, spending 2 spell slots, manage to free him during the confusion. After a few hours, the PCs, mainly the warrior types, a ranger and a barbarian, and the bard, solve the mystery and get to the climactic fight at the top of the tower against the gnome spy, who turned out to be a cultist from an enemy deity to the clerics. The investigation got a bit easier, since many of the suspects were at the courtyard instead of in their cells, but still used most of the plot points. However, only 3 PCs were present, instead of 6. Resender, Cleric, and Rogue were absent for most of the time because they were saving/hiding Resender. The PCs had less spells because they were helping Resender. This ended up with the unfortunate death of the immediate death of the ranger, later death of the bard by a curse, and the casting of permanent blindness on the rogue. Oh boy, I missed 3.5. 3.5 seems a bit... It seems interesting. I've always been kind of interested in those, like, permanent effects. The trying to figure out how to go around the blindness and the losing the leg and stuff like that. And the enemy decided to flee after humiliating them, using a summoned giant bat, but not on Resender's watch. Huh? I jump after him, like, on the bat. Are you sure? Yes! After a roll, he had no acrobatics and not great athletics, mind you. Resender ended up crashing and having to hold onto a parapet with just one arm, which the enemy promptly cut off as he fell to his death. Sorry, it's just funny. You jump onto a bat with no acrobatics or athletics. I'm also like laughing at the idea of a giant bat with this guy, this gnome, just on top of it. So, this is the second part of the story. This will likely be shorter because this is probably the most normal and okay character this player ever did, but that's not saying much. Some context to those not coming from the previous post. Newish guy, but said to have experience. Our Resender managed to kill 1/3 of the party on his debut, and now has rolled up a new character. And so have the other players who met their unfortunate demise. The game is 3.5. The cast. Me, DM. Barbarian, actually fighter barbarian, but this is for short. Rogue, no fighter rogue, and at this time blind, because of Resender-related shenanigans, and kinda pissed at him. Cleric, actually cleric rogue. A known cleric of the god of law, natural law, earth, and authority. Ranger, the bard from the previous story, and playing the long-lost brother of Rogue, who was at first interpreted by other players who had to leave for job-related issues about 8 months prior to the story. He adopted the character after Bard died. Fighter, the ranger from the previous story, with a bow and arrow focused build. And of course, our star, Resender, now playing a cleric. Well, sort of. You see, during the Battle of the Crow Tower from the previous post, he learned that, unlike a fighter, a cleric might eventually attack with his precious 3 weapons, being 1 on each hand, and a summoned spiritual weapon. Oh my goodness, of course. He became a cleric just to get that 3rd weapon. Much like on 5e, a floating weapon representing the god's weapon, but without the need for spending bonus actions, since those did not exist in 3.5. So, he thought, main weapon attack plus second weapon attack plus spiritual weapon equals profit, or equal anime character accomplished. However, he was very thoroughly warned that A. Priests do not have the same martial prowess as fighters, and B. have a deep commitment to their religion and might be a bit of a role-playing challenge. He, being Resender, of course, proceeded to ignore the 2. Also, he wanted to be proficient with long swords, which, by default, clerics are not, and thus had to pick the war domain to gain it. In this homebrew setting, there were 4 gods that could give it, and since one looked too good to choose, and the other 2 were too weird, he decided then to pick Soliver, the god of tactics, the game of chess, competition, and strategy. Essentially, the god's teaching revolved around strategy. Ironic, I know. Level-headedness and knowledge, preparation, but also never denying the god's name or losing temper. Now, the rogue, as I said, started to get some animosity to him out of game, mainly for derailing the previous game. He didn't hate the guy, but was clear he didn't go out of his way to help him again if he did something too stupid. Luckily, this character did not want to challenge everyone to a duel, but he did overcorrect and play a bit cowardly, and was very guarded about casting his spells. The plot at this point revolved around coming to a new town, a mining town, and the final destination of the expedition they were in, where the previous villain, evil cleric/cultist type, was making various blood sacrifices at an old mine, as well as creating animosity between the various mining guilds and mercenary companies in the city, in order to ultimately summon a demon. The players, with the help as the previous gnome NPCs, joined one of the companies, since it's the easiest way to be allowed in the mines to investigate, and after a bit of intrigue, came into their first mine expedition. Here, they met the usual monsters, plus people hired by rival companies, and got into some fights. During those, Resender would just attack from the backline with a sword, the one he had wisely decided to use a shield until he got to pick the feat to dual wield, and only when someone was already engaged. The fight would go like, Resender, you won initiative, what will you do? I wait until another player attacks, and so on. He would also never use his spells, ever. When someone, especially the other cleric, asked why he didn't cast so-and-so, he would just answer, strategy? He thought he was doing a play with his god thing, Even when another player fell in combat, he did not heal him or even get close to protect him, just saying, in character, "Shut up, it's my strategy," and so on. Eventually, the players got some information on the mines about a compromised company and came back to town to present it to the mayor and council. After this, they got a pass to operate more or less independently and had a meeting with the other players to decide what to do next. Some wanted to go after the haunted mine where the cultist could be, he was there, while the others wanted to investigate more plot hooks around town, all ultimately linked to the cult. And Resender was on the second group. As they discussed, he got into a serious argument with Rogue and said, "This is more strategic, as we can level up more before the fight, and thus is what my god would do." I'm pretty sure that, yeah, I intervened saying the god doesn't necessarily know XP points existed. Yep. That's what I was thinking. And that they also have no way of knowing if the cultist wouldn't be able to reinforce or even succeed as his objective at the meantime. Rogue created a very well-constructed, if angry, argument in character about how it would be more strategic to go after the enemy now, before he even discovered they knew where he was, and had a plan to counter them. Ended up with, "Ain't this what Sulliver would do?" Resender, losing patience. "Well, if he would, then he's dumb for not understanding more adventures means more power." I asked if that was really in character, and had him pass a very easy religion knowledge to understand that this is blasphemy. He passed and said, "Well, I don't say this then, I guess." Eventually, they decided to go to the mine, which ended up having, after a fight against giant spiders, the entrance to an old, desecrated temple of Sulliver, with a few puzzles, most of which could be solved, but either passing them or disarming their magical triggers, something only the rogues, gnome, cleric, rogue, and the actual rogue, could do. With this, I wanted to introduce better the new player and have him interact more with the lore. Resender, of course, insisted that, since this was a sanctuary to his god, he should go through the trials alone, something never mentioned to him anywhere, so he could get all the XP, a better strategy, of course, and he especially did not want the help of Rogue, because he was a filthy infidel, not strategic enough. So he ended up failing most of the puzzles, and taking some form of damage / dealing it to the group, until either one of the others would solve it, or Cleric disarm them. Rogue, at this point, had decided to let Resender do his thing. As a result, Resender got to a very low health, despite the other Cleric healing him and spending all his spell slots, but did not heal himself. Strategy? At no point. Eventually the group, and I, learned, surprised, that he had not prepared any healing spells for the day. Strategy? Just as they got to fight the evil gnome cultist boss. During this final fight, however, Resender finally demonstrated the depth of his planning and strategy, not casting any spell and attacking with his sword only when other players were engaged, until eventually getting to 0 HP and becoming unconscious. He did not die though, not this time. But after the fight, he decided that being a cleric might not be his thing after all. He came up with his new and final character, the dumbest and probably most incredibly played of them all, a wizard, which I will talk about in a future post, or right after this. Resender, the wisest, R-star, now a wizard of the prestigious Amethyst Order, and basically the only way to learn the wizard class on this part of the setting, except for 2 to 3 independent and recluse masters, or evil demon dealing shenanigans to get prohibited tomes. His character was a somewhat new wizard of the Order, just having completed his training and tasked by Mira or Tissia herself, the leader of the Order and famous hero, with helping a rising band of adventurers to fight their way through the unexplored ice mountains to the north to find the final destiny of a missing hero. Kinda sounds interesting. Feeling the envoy might not be up for the task, Mira gave him a potion of fire breathing, a potion of healing, and in total 4 scrolls, among them specifically protection from cold, featherfall, and spider climb, for obvious reasons. The last was some attack scroll. Now, for those not into wizards or D&D, the first protects you from all but the coldest of frost attacks. The second makes fall like a plume and take no damage from falling. No test required. And the third makes you capable of walking on walls. No test required. Myra left for Resender the decision of whether he wanted to try and learn and later memorize the spells. He didn't. Which I'm pretty sure that is something a wizard can do. They can, like, spend the scroll to, like, put it into their grimoire or their spellbook. I'm never played a wizard, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works because one of the other players was playing a wizard. But I do know that it costs money, if I remember correctly. Anyway, our group of heroes play a whole session involving their meeting and travels through dangerous lands until Kajur, the last bastion of civilization before the mountains. All of those adventures, although interesting, do not concern our tale of wizardly foolishness, but I am mentioning it so that you can, if you dare, excuse Resender from his foolishness. Anyway, come the second session of the mage, they left Kajur on the direction of the mountains, and temperatures started to fall harshly as the cold winds of the north blew. Players who remember to buy proper clothes also got a small bonus, but of course, Resender and also Barbarian, for some reason, decided not to. All characters were required to make fortitude saves, basically your current con save, to endure, avoiding frostbite and possibly exhaustion penalties. All players, but Rogue and Resender, actually made their saves. But Rogue is higher level and takes some significant, but not crippling, damages. Resender doesn't remember to ever use his scroll of protection from cold, and thus ends up falling in battle against common road bandits. He also did not memorize any defensive spells, no arcane armor, no shield, no nothing. After only one attack, a magic missile dealing something like 6 damage to a bandit, Cleric, not wanting to spend his own spell slots that might be more useful later, took Resender's potion of healing and administered it to our hero. A few hours later, they got to the mountain, and it looked like a hard climb, and although they did have the proper equipment, only Barbarian, Rogue, and Ranger got the proper survival and climb skills. The cold also seemed to get worse, so Cleric asked his god for protection for him and Rogue, casting, you guessed it, protection from elements, cold, and said, in character, Hey Resender, I hear the wizards from the Order are resourceful, even the apprentices. Maybe you don't have some spell to protect you from the cold as well? Looking at his character sheet. No. You do remember the scroll of protection from cold. Oh, right. I cast it? Okay. Resender thus survives a bit more, but it's time for the dreaded climbing checks, with bonuses for the equipment Ranger bought, and they all make it. However, the group fails perception, and is ambushed mid-climb by a group of orcs and goblins, a common sight on these parts. A frenetic combat starts with the orcs trying to cut their ropes in the hope that maybe they can recover and then steal their equipment. During the combat, of course, new climbing tests are necessary, and Cleric fails and ends up hanging by the rope, but is saved by Ranger, who courageously cuts himself loose of the rope to reach him. Rogue also fails a roll and dangles. Resender, the brave, tries to do the same and save him as well. Rogue, maybe you want to cast? Resender, interrupting. Leroy, I don't really understand that. I cut my rope and go save him, and he rolls a natural 1. Of course he did. Resender is now falling to his death, hundreds of meters below. Maybe you want to cast some spell? You have 1 turn before you hit the ground. 3.5 did not have the concept of reaction yet. Looking at his sheet. I cast False Life. A 3.5 spell that gives 1d10 plus level extra HP. Wow. Make an intelligence check. Huh? I got it. I cast False Life, so I can resist the damage from the fall. I don't think that would be enough to resist the damage from a fall hundreds of meters up. He has the spell scroll for it, but I have a feeling he doesn't really know how to play. Resender proceeds to fall to his instant death, taking 10d6 damage versus his 12 HP plus 9 extra HP. This was the last time we invited Resender to play. The epilogue. 3 years later, however, I DM'd another game on the same area of the setting, and 2 of the same players, plus a few others. And as they prepared to climb to the Frost Mountains, they noticed a half-frozen skeleton close to the ground. Players were so sure it was a trap. Bards search for traps. And Wizard, actually Cleric from the story above, cast Detect Traps and then Detect Magic. How much you want to bet that's dead Resender? I know it. I know it. Me. You see no traps, but you see that the skeleton has 3 arcane scrolls with him. Of course. That's so funny. Cleric, now Wizard. I checked the corpse. Perhaps it looks a bit convenient, but the corpse has a scroll of Feather Fall, a scroll of Spider Climb, and a scroll of Acid Arrow with him. And Claire laughing ensues. That is funny. Making sure to add him with his 3 scrolls that he could have used to save himself. But that's the end of this story. I hope you like my cat. I got a little kitty in my lap, and I got a little cat telling you who is the user who did this story. I got some changes. I really like the ending of this one. I don't really know why they would have gotten rid of him. Like, yeah, there was dumb choices, but just let him know that they're dumb choices. Because nobody's gonna learn without being, you know, told. But I love the end. If you like this story, please like, comment, and subscribe. I am playing Sinking City, and I will be trying to do live streams at least every Saturday, and possibly Sundays. The baby has been a bit difficult to put down for bed, so it could be around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m., depending on him. And I do have some Amazon affiliate links in the description, so if any of those fit your fancy, then click on the links and I can get a little bit of affiliate with it. I don't really have much because I'm still trying to figure out what I like for D&D, which I am doing a session this week. Well, soon. I'm gonna be doing it's the Spelljammer one. I'm gonna just be doing it to try. And if I enjoy DMing, I'm thinking about doing the it's the Vecna Eye of something. I can't think of the word right now. But anyways, that's all. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Bye!